Ice caps melting, oceans rising, greenhouse gases building in the atmosphere, record-breaking heat, storms that grow stronger every year. When we hear about climate change, it often sounds like something happening to glaciers, forests, or coastlines far away. But climate change isn't just happening somewhere else. Sometimes it's happening right outside your front door. This April, on the Story Clutter, we're bringing you a special series about urban climate change. Through 8 true personal stories about science, we explore how the forces that shape our planet, earth, water, fire, and air, show up in the places most of us actually live, our cities. From flooded streets to wildfires uprooting day-to-day life, to the invisible air we breathe suddenly becoming impossible to ignore. These are the moments when climate change stops being abstract and becomes personal. 8 stories, 4 elements, 1 planet in crisis. Join us this April for the Story Collider Stories of Urban Climate Change. True, personal stories about science.
A science story, huh?
These NYU scientists, they
felt
right.
But I was so
And I just thought, well,
I had figured it out.
It was that golden moment.
Because science was on my side.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Story Clatter, where true personal stories about science help us to discover how weird, complicated, and deeply human this world can be. I'm your host, Misha Gajewski, and in today's episode, both of our stories explore the impacts of wildfires. Wildfire is one of the most powerful natural forces on Earth. For millions of years, fire has shaped ecosystems, clearing old growth, returning nutrients to the soil, and helping some forests regenerate. But in recent years, wildfires have been happening more frequently, as well as growing larger, hotter, and harder to control. Climate change is extending fire seasons, drying out forests, and creating the perfect conditions for fires to spread faster and farther than they used to. And increasingly, those fires aren't just happening in remote wilderness. They're happening closer and closer to where people live, impacting cities, towns, and communities that never expected to find themselves on the front lines of a wildfire. Beyond the flames themselves, wildfires leave behind smoke that travels hundreds or even thousands of miles, affecting air quality, health, and daily life for millions of people. In today's episode, both of our storytellers share personal moments when wildfires moved from being a distant headline to something much closer to home. Our first story is from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory Chief Engineer for the Europa Clipper mission, Tracy Drain. Her story was recorded in August last year in Los Angeles with our friends at LAist. Here's Tracy.
I am Tracy Drain, Chief Engineer of NASA's Europa Clipper mission. When I first started working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory as an aerospace systems engineer, I was motivated by the wonders of space and the challenges of solving thorny technical problems. Now, I'm living my dream to explore strange new worlds, to boldly send robotic spacecraft where no one has been before. Europa Clipper launched in October 2024 and is on a 5.5-year journey to Jupiter. Once there, it'll study the moon Europa, in part because scientists think it has a huge ocean of liquid water beneath a shell of ice. Geordi LaForge, chief engineer on the Starship Enterprise on Star Trek, is one of my childhood heroes. My job is kind of like his. 1, identify technical risks that could threaten the mission. 2, make sure they either can't happen, or if they do, we can do something about it. It's kind of like disaster planning in space. Example, what if something went wrong with a telecommunication system on a robotic spacecraft and it couldn't receive a signal from the Earth? If it just sat there doing nothing forever, it would be game over. So, as one safety net, Clipper is programmed to take action if it hasn't heard from the Earth in a certain adjustable amount of time. It'll go, something must be wrong with me. and start resetting and swapping hardware in an escalating fashion, which is great if there really is something to fix. But it can also leave a bit of a mess to clean up. And there's always a tiny chance there will be unexpected shenanigans. So we really don't want it to do that unless it actually has to, if there's something really to fix. We really don't want it to in case there is actually a problem. This past January, Europa Clipper was only 3 months old, and we were still checking it out, operating flight activities almost every weekday in order to make sure everything on the spacecraft and the instruments was working properly. Tuesday morning, it was windy, really windy. It was the Santa Anas. Driving into work, I could see bits of tree debris and hunks of cardboard blowing past in the wind. But I was still surprised when I got to the lab to see what looked like half a tree had come down and was blocking the main entrance. So I had to back up and drive all the way around to the east side. And there I could see and hear the gritty soil on that side sandblasting my car as I gripped my steering wheel to stay in my lane against the gust. But eventually, I joined the rest of the team trickling into the operations building. Like me, everyone seemed cautiously alert, but upbeat, ready to just get going with the day's activities. Happily, everything went great with the activities that day, but we did hear that the winds were intended to peak the next morning. So we opted to shift the next day's start time to 1 p.m. to be on the safe side. Now that night, an email went out to all JPL employees saying that fire had picked up in Eaton Canyon, and because of the high winds, could move fast. So no one should come into the work that day. It was much closer to the lab than the Pacific Palisades fire that had happened earlier that day. So the Clipper mission manager immediately sent out an email to the entire Clipper operations team saying, clearly we were waving off the activities for that day, and everyone should just take care of themselves and their family, stay safe. At my house, a little bit farther west in Glendale, we went to bed worried. The next morning, we woke up to a disaster in progress. The fire had spread much farther, much faster than anyone had anticipated. People had been and were being evacuated. We were getting little update emails from folks from their cafes or from the homes of friends and families. And then another email went out from the lab saying that not only was JPL closed, but it was being fully evacuated. Everything was being completely powered off. Even the operations facilities, they were not even being left on backup generator power. Now, this had been practiced in drills, but had never been done before in the entire history of the lab for real. And I was stunned. I was like, wow, JPL is going dark. And then I thought, oh no, Europa. Now, the JPL managed ground stations all around the world that handled the data coming down from spacecraft of all sorts of missions, including Europa, were still operational. It was still collecting and storing that data, which was great. But with JPL offline, that data wasn't being sent anywhere. And so our operations team, scattered as we were, could not remote log in and see it and check on the state of the spacecraft or communicate with it in any way. It was like we had turned off our end of the baby monitor in Clipper's crib, which was going to be a problem because we were going to have to get a message to her. In case we reset it, this baby spacecraft would start acting out, just as she was programmed to when her timer expired on Sunday morning at 8:24 a.m. Disaster planning. It's about priorities, knowing what is important and not, what is time critical and not, having a plan E, a plan B, and so on. So, priorities. I was really proud of our Clipper leadership team that we immediately, unequivocally put our team and their safety as priority number one. We now waived off even all the virtual meetings on Wednesday and told everyone just do what you got to do to stay safe. At my house in Glendale, we were lucky. We were not in immediate danger. But the sky overlooking our usually lovely view of downtown Glendale was pitch black with smoke. We downloaded the Watch Duty Fire app. We turned on CNN. We packed go bags in case the situation changed dramatically. Priority number two, figure out a path forward for the spacecraft. Plan A, send a command to Clipper. So we had a command built that would set the timer to 14 days, which is cushy, essentially telling her, hey, your parents are kind of busy down here. Please don't start doing all those things. Just chill out for a while. You're fine. It's not you. It's us. Plan B, be ready to deal with the fallout if we couldn't get the command sent in time. Now, Plan A was complicated because it would mean you had to get the power up at the lab, check out all the ground equipment, make sure it was working, boot up the servers in the mission support area for Clipper, and then finally hit the button to send the command file through the ground stations across 25 million miles of space to the spacecraft. Plan B is complicated because if you needed it, it meant Clipper would have started doing that hardware swapping. And so whenever you could get a command to her to stop that, you'd have to figure out what state she was in, see if any unexpected shenanigans had happened, and then regardless, spend a couple of pretty intense days commanding her back into happy baby spacecraft mode. I did not love Plan B because now we had over 90% of the necessary steps worked out from before launch, but you can never have every last detail of every contingency scenario ready to go before you need it. There's just too many possible permutations. And besides, whenever you're doing complicated activities, there's a small chance of an unexpected problem. Now, this is our job. We literally do this for a living. But past experience has taught me to strongly prefer the simpler options. So, as complicated as that first option might have sounded to you guys, I was all, come on, Plan A. But because we couldn't be 100% sure that would pan out, we had to work both paths simultaneously. After reaching out to our mission management via text and emails that afternoon in and around the chaos, I reached out to a set of folks who were still ready and able to work. And we set up 2 teleconferences for early the next morning to start fleshing out the plans forward. Then I am now Geordie LaForge. I am answering the call from my captain, wrangling the engineering team, making sure everyone knew what to do in order to send them off to work out all the details. Early the next morning, we had our telecoms, and then everyone was off and running. And now I become a little bit like a spider in the web, keeping my fingers on the threads to sense what's going on, being ready to give guidance and advice as necessary. Over here, Plan A. I learned that the Clipper project manager had communicated with the JPL lab director. She understood our situation and people were going to work to try to accommodate our timeline. Okay. Over here, Plan B. I learned that folks on our team had brushed off the what exactly would Clipper do when timeline and identified some actions to follow up on to make sure we were really ready to execute the necessary steps. And then over here, checking in on the people in general, we learned that this person had no power at their house and was working from a cafe. This person and their family was staying at the home of another team member. This person hadn't been heard from yet. And so on. At my house, sky's still black, Stevie's still on, showing CNN with horrible images of the fire, and the western edge of the evacuation zone is creeping slowly towards our house. So that night, we set an alarm to wake ourselves up every 2 hours, just in case things change dramatically. And on into the next day. Over here, Plan A. We learned that brave, dedicated people were heading into the lab wearing respirators because of the terrible air quality. Good. And then over here, Plan B. Our folks had realized that we were missing a couple of command products, little prepackaged files for the spacecraft that we didn't have on the shelf and we needed to make. But we couldn't make them until the power was up and the servers were back on, so that was going to elongate the recovery timeline a little bit. And then here, checking in on the people in general, now we started hearing terrible news of more and more JPLers confirmed to have lost their homes. But also, people were ground roots creating GoFundMe pages for them to already start trying to help them out. Priority number 1, putting the people first. And so on it went. Text mails, voicemails, emails, phone calls. And finally, we got a little bright spot of news. Over here, Plan A, we heard that the power was back up at JPL. Yes! So I kept my hand on that thread more and more. And as time continued to tick by, we learned that the ground equipment had been checked out and was working. Great. And then the servers were booted up in the mission control area. And then our people were able to remote log in and restart all the software. And finally, the command was sent. Clipper was set to just twiddle her toes for 2 weeks if necessary. Plan A for the win! Yay! I had such a huge release of pent-up tension and such deep gratitude for the folks who pulled together to pull this off in this insane time. I was still a bit shell-shocked because of the damage the fire was still doing to the communities, and my heart was so warm for the support that people were already offering to the evacuees and the people who were now unhomed. When I first started working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory as an aerospace systems engineer, I was motivated by the wonders of space and the challenges of solving thorny technical problems. But after all these years, the thing that has kept me doing this very demanding and sometimes incredibly stressful work has been the people, the dedicated, brilliant, warm, funny people who make it all worthwhile. This really brought that into sharp focus for me. I cannot believe it has been only like over half a year since that whole thing went down. The spacecraft is still fine, still on her way to Jupiter. We're still trying to take good care of our colleagues. We remind ourselves that even though the fire doesn't make the news very much anymore, it's still having a huge impact on people's lives. It's going to take years for the people and the communities that were hardest hit to fully recover. Europa Clipper will arrive at Jupiter in April of 2030. That's a long way still to go. And the universe is going to continue throwing surprises at us, both in space and clearly also here on the ground. I personally hope that as we continue to face those obstacles, we do our best to keep putting the people, all of the people, first. Thank you.
The LA fires were devastating to so many people in so many different ways, and I appreciate how Tracy's story highlights an impact that most of us would never have thought about because we didn't see it in the news or hear about it on social media. If you'd like to learn more about Tracy, head over to our website, storyclatter.org. Not everyone feels comfortable stepping up to the mic, and that's fine. There's another way to make Story Clatter happen, by becoming a donor. Right now, more than ever, the voices of scientists and science communicators need to be heard. At Storyclatter, we know that personal stories can break through the noise, connect people to the human side of science, and make complex ideas feel real. But keeping these stories alive and accessible takes support. Our donors make this possible. They help us produce the podcast, share stories that might otherwise go unheard, and spark conversations that stick with you long after the episode ends. If you believe in the power of science storytelling, consider making a donation at storyclatter.org/donate. Most people give $10 a month, but every tax-deductible gift, big or small, helps keep the mics on and the stories coming. Thank you for helping make sure these stories are heard. Our next story is from Victoria Dinov. She's a graduate student at Stanford studying energy science and engineering. Her story is recorded this year at her home in Palo Alto, California. Here's Victoria.
So, it's just around lunchtime on October 21st, 2007, when my family and I hear the news that there's a fire. We hear the news from our neighborhood watch group, kind of like next door, and someone had posted and my parents see that the fire is in this city called Ramona, which is around 30 miles from us. My dad goes upstairs to grab this old Midlands weather radio, and we are basically just monitoring it to hear about the latest news on the fire. Nothing seems too concerning initially, and our neighborhood watch says we're safe to stay indoors since the fire is still, pretty far away. We kind of continue our activities, but then around lunch, we eat pretty late, so 1:30 p.m.-ish, we get a call on the landline. I'm still pretty young, around 5 or 6 years old, but I get up to answer the call and make, the sound of the phone stop. I answer it, and there's an automated message telling everyone to evacuate. I look over at my parents, and their eyes are big, and they start running around in full panic mode. My dad grabs me and runs me to our car in the garage. He starts grabbing electronics and clothing, and also digging in the safe for what I assume are our documents like passports and birth certificates. My mom is really focused on food for some reason, and is throwing all the food from our pantry into this big camping backpack and filling up dozens of water bottles. My sister, who's 16, calls her friends and starts giggling, and it feels kind of dichotomous because here are my parents, pretty freaked out, and then there's my sister, chatting to her friend, saying she's escaping a near-death experience like she's in a movie. She has this thrill in her voice, and I think, maybe this isn't the end of the world anyways. I have this weird urge to grab some of my belongings, so I get up and decide to run to my room really quickly and grab a few of my favorite toys. Even though I'm really young, something tells me I won't be home for the night, and I know I need my dolphin and my ladybug animals with me. I sneak up the stairs, both to avoid the chaos of my parents, who are still running around, and also because something tells me I probably should have stayed in the car. I find my dolphin pretty immediately, and have this stark memory where the stone gray of the fur is painted in this light reddish tint. It's this undescribable feeling, really, because obviously I don't know exactly what that means, but it feels dangerous. The entire room is this reddish haze, and I sort of freeze staring at it. My eyes are blurring, and this thin veil of smoke is entering through the windowsill that I sit entranced by. It kind of matches the somber tone of the ambulances that are blaring, in the distance. Something sort of snaps, and then I sprint downstairs again. I get into the car, and I remember my dad getting into the driver's seat and saying, "Say your goodbyes, just in case." He kind of chuckles, but no one else laughs, not even my sister. We drive 90 miles per hour down the freeway, taking random exits and then getting back on. My parents are really intently listening to the radio that is directing people from my area, telling us the coordinates and updated location of the fire. I'm annoyed that we're constantly heading in what feels like random directions. First, we're headed south to the beach, but then hear of another fire from the east, so have to go more west. I can tell my parents are also getting frustrated, because it's almost like we're getting boxed in. We keep getting siphoned into a southwest direction until eventually it feels like there's nowhere left to go. For context, the original fire in the north is the Witch Creek Fire, but then another fire in the east starts called the McCoy Fire. Lastly, as it goes with these type of stuff in SoCal, there's yet another fire in the west called the Pumacha Fire. They eventually all merge into this massive wave of destruction that really feels like there's no escape from. An hour or so later, we're still headed pretty fast down the major highway in San Diego, the I-15. At this point, we've been redirected so many times we're basically only a few miles from my house. The trees around us are singed, and I'm looking at the blackened trees and shrubs, and they're all twisted and falling down as we head back slightly southeast from where we are. Most of the time, I'm clutching my dolphin and also holding my sister's hand. At this point, she no longer seems super excited, and I can tell she's nervous. This weird part of my young brain tells me I have to be brave for her, so I remember that I hold her hand thinking that it's making her feel better. In reality, I'm sure she's thinking the same thing, and that she has a responsibility to protect me in some way. I keep looking back at where we're leaving from and feeling so shocked. This is the normal freeway I've taken hundreds of times to get to my swim practices and my piano teacher's house, so it's really familiar to me. Normally, in true San Diego fashion, it's super green and chaparral shrubby with some scattered trees. This time, it's like a patchy version of that with charred trees and some of the shrubs that look super shriveled. There's these small little patches of greenery that are just starkly contrasting to the rest of the mix. At some point, ash is swirling in the wind. I don't know what it is, but it feels like snow. Like snowflakes dripping from the sky. But this time, they stick to our windshield in a weird way and make it all black. It's super unnerving, and my dad tries to scrape them off. But they're really resisting, even when he sprays the windshield with water. Most of the time, my mom is using our Midlands and the neighborhood watch group to direct us. We have a solid direction, finally, which is southeast, and as we keep hurtling down the road in that direction, we're engulfed by this army of helicopters. We're passing by this big lake a dozen or so miles away from my house, and the helicopters are almost nosediving into the lake, carrying buckets loaded with water in the direction of the fires. My mom is calling all her friends to see who lives in that direction and who we can stay with, and eventually one of our Bulgarian friends, my parents are Bulgarian, offers to host us. Their house is pretty far, like 50 miles, so it takes around 40 minutes to get there, but eventually we do. And even that far, the sky is still covered in ash. I run inside when we get there, pinching my nose and shielding my eyes as instructed by my mom, but I can still smell this roasted, charred type smell that's almost like a campfire, but feels more ominous and just wrong. We end up sheltering there for almost a week, and our two families, we basically just keep the windows closed from the hot 95-degree weather outside, and we're always drawing the curtains to avoid having to see what's out there. And I don't know, it feels safer. It feels more ignorant. Eventually, the neighborhood gossip in our Midlands tell us to go home. So we crunch back to the car and drive back in silence, past all the fallen trees and the charred lands and the wreckage that are filling the windows of the car until we get home. When we pull into our neighborhood, most of the houses are intact. But as we drive deeper, we live kind of deep in the neighborhood. We keep seeing broken down houses and burned bushes and the whole gambit. When we pull into our cul-de-sac kind of at the end of the neighborhood, it's like a ceremonial mourning of the dead. I mean, pieces of houses and roofs and garden decor are just strewn across the street. It looks like little mementos of life pre-fire. I turn around in a circle, my eyes burning from what I think are ashes, but realistically are tears, when I see all the mounds of houses and fallen fences and what honestly looks like trash. The best way to describe how I feel is shell-shocked. All I could think was, please not my house. Please not my room, not my kitchen. Just please not us. In the circle of 5 houses, 2 lay like tiny, shiny little treasures in the destruction. All the black, charred furniture, the smelted structural supports, the gray lawns covered the whole neighborhood. Yet those 2 houses, even though they looked a little singed themselves, remained standing. Somehow, I really don't know how, our house is among them. We're all silent, staring, until I start crying. In a weird way of relief, but also it feels like this fever dream of horror is finally over. My dad, weirdly enough, starts to clap and turns around and shouts at the sky in Bulgarian, in an angry-sounding way, but he's really thanking the world for saving us. I really don't know what my family would do if our house was among the wreckage. My parents are pretty quick to act, so they almost immediately start posting on the neighborhood watch to see how they could help out other families. We spend a lot of time and many days helping our neighbors salvage some of the wreckage for mementos, heirlooms, things that are not totally gone. The fire was all over the news. The Witch Creek Guajito Pumacha complex fire, they kept saying. I remember thinking, yeah, that fire ruined my neighborhood's friends' lives. I mean, many of them moved away. They left San Diego. I'm pretty sure many of the families really struggled, and many are still struggling to get back on their feet. It's awful. Now, many, many years later, my life has really shaped itself around understanding and responding to these firestorms that happened in 2007 and since. After that initial fire, there have been dozens of other incidents in my community. The 2010 Easter Day earthquake, the 2014 Talega fires, extreme droughts, the list just goes on. Initially, these events were super triggering to me, but at some point it almost became the norm. My neighbors started to carry emergency fire safety kits. My parents would often monitor the storm data and information about incoming weather events. We did even more emergency drills at school for fires and earthquakes. To me, it was pretty much the norm to think about fires all the time and have an emergency kit under my bed in the case of a quick evacuation. Natural disasters have tripled in frequency since the 1980s and will continue to exponentially increase. It makes me sad to think about all of the kids that will have to experience the terror that I did and how many more families and communities will be negatively impacted. A big part of why I began climate activism in high school was in response to these events. I was part of the Sunrise Movement and organized marches, rallies, protests, alongside advocating for climate-forward government policies. Since then, I've wanted to focus more on those experiences as a child and work in a more climate and clean energy related space. It took me a long time in college to find that niche, but eventually I found energy engineering and realized that I could do work that directly addressed the increasing amounts of extreme weather events. I'm currently a graduate student, and a large portion of my research exactly focuses on building resilience of the grid and how we can evaluate that. The definition of resilience in power systems quite literally discusses how the power grid can withstand, respond to, and adapt from these high-impact, low-probability events. Although I'm approaching this from a more technical standpoint, I also focus on how we can make sure to protect the people who can't just pay their way out of these disasters. Every day, I talk to system operators and scientists at National Lab who say, we are screwed, and we cannot afford to have any setbacks to changing the way we approach climate change adaptation and emissions reductions. It honestly hurts my soul that we're experiencing so many setbacks now, especially since it's people with less resources that will bear the burden of this. The people who can't afford exorbitant power prices. The people living near plants emitting thousands of tons of emissions. The people who will continue to be disproportionately impacted. My family was really really lucky. If our house had burned down, I don't think we would have been able to build back up. My parents are immigrants to the US and have no one to rely on or bail them out of these emergencies. We initially thought that this first fire was a one-off, low-probability, high-impact event. But every future fire or earthquake or weather event that happens in my community is very stressful for my parents, and I can see the effects. I think for a lot of people, it's been really easy to separate themselves from the effects of climate change. This was not the case for me. It really impacted how I thought about the future of our world and how it would affect myself and the people I love. There's not a lot that we can do alone as individuals about our current situation, but I hope that we can, as a collective, work towards a future in which the people experiencing the effects of climate change are kept safe. Our society owes it to each other to make sure people aren't left houseless or in extreme amounts of debt after these events.
Wow, what a terrifying experience for a kid, or anyone really. And while it sucks Victoria had to experience that, I'm glad it fueled her to do what she does today. If you'd like to learn more about Victoria, visit our website, storyclatter.org. Our website is just one way to connect with Storyclatter, but there are so many other ways. You can always follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Head to storyclatter.org to become a financial supporter. If you're interested in coming to one of our live shows or starting a Storyclatter show in your own community, you can find the details on our website. You can also learn how to tell your own science story or send us your science story too. And if you like this podcast, tell a friend. Share an episode, introduce someone to Storyclatter, and help bring more people into the world of science storytelling. This podcast is produced by me, Misha Gajewski, along with Jen Chen, Nikisha Roberts-Washington, and Aaron Barker. The stories featured in today's episode were produced by Brian Kett and me. Special thanks goes out to Storyclatter's board and team. Our theme music is by Ghost, and next week we'll be back with the last episode in this series, which focuses on air. You won't want to miss it. Until next time, thanks so much for listening.